Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually when we grab a book from the stack on the desk here, we have a pretty clear idea of what we're getting into. We're looking for a specific strategy. We want a hack for productivity or a new way to understand the stock market or maybe just a history lesson. But today, well, today feels really different.
Feels completely different, yeah.
We are looking at the third edition of Out of Our Minds, The Power of Being Creative by Sir Ken Robinson. And I have to be honest, looking at my notes here, I hesitated to call this a business book. It feels way too small a word. If I file this under business or even education, I feel like I'm missing the point entirely.
I know exactly what you mean. If you approach this text expecting a manual on how to run a marketing meeting, or you know how to grade a middle school math test, you're going to be very surprised. Robinson isn't writing about administration here. He's really writing a survival guide.
A survival guide? I mean, that sounds pretty dire.
Well, think about the sheer scope of it. He is writing a survival guide for the human spirit in the 21st century. He isn't asking, how do we make more money or how do we get better standardized test scores? He is asking, how do we stay human? How do we keep our souls intact when the world around us is moving so much faster than our biology and, frankly, our institutions can actually handle?
That is a heavy opener, but it matches the tone of the book right from the preface. He starts with this paradox that I found just really unsettling. He says, look around you. Objectively, if you live in the developed world, you are living like a god compared to your ancestors.
Right. Just think about it for a second. We have antibiotics, we have the internet, we have safe anesthesia. You can order Thai food from your phone at 2 in the morning and have it handed to you at your door. We have access to the sum total of human knowledge sitting right in our pockets.
Exactly. The standard of living is just through the roof. But, and here's the kicker for this whole conversation, Robinson argues that the quality of life isn't keeping up. In fact, for a lot of people, despite all the glowing screens and the gadgets and the modern medicine, the actual quality of life is tanking.
It is the critical difference between standard and quality. Standard of living is about your stuff. It's about GDP. It's about metrics. Quality of life is about your state of being. It's about how you feel when you wake up in the morning and look at the ceiling.
Yeah.
And the statistics totally back him up. We see rising depression, massive disengagement at work, people who are just totally checking out, and this pervasive baseline sense of anxiety. And Robinson frames this entire situation as a dual crisis.
Okay, let's walk through this dual crisis because we all know the first one, right? It's on the news every single night.
Yeah, the first one is the natural resources crisis. Climate change, deforestation, stripping the earth of minerals. We know we are trashing the planet. We have global summits about it. We sign treaties. We worry constantly about our carbon footprint.
We stress out about it every time we see a plastic straw at a restaurant, basically.
Exactly. We are painfully aware that natural resources are finite. But Robinson says there is a second crisis running perfectly parallel to it that is just as dangerous, but we hardly ever talk about it. And that is the crisis of human resources.
Meaning, what exactly? We're running out of people. Last I checked, the global population was still going up pretty steadily.
No, not that we lack physical bodies. It's that we are actively trashing the people we already have. He argues that we are systematically burying human talent deep underground. We are either failing to mine it so people live their whole entire lives never knowing what they're actually good at, or we're actively contaminating it with systems that just crush creativity.
That is a really violent metaphor.
Yeah.
Contaminating.
He means it, though. Think about the analogy he is drawing. If a major corporation spilled 1 million gallons of crude oil into the ocean, it's a global tragedy. It's on the front page. There are massive lawsuits. We see the heartbreaking photos of the birds covered in black sludge. But if an education system takes 1 million school kids and forces them through a rigid cookie-cutter mold that convinces them they aren't smart just because they aren't good at abstract algebra or because they can't sit perfectly still at a desk for 6 hours a day, well, you have wasted a massive amount of human potential. You've spilled that talent. But there is no news report for that. There is no emergency cleanup crew.
Wow, that really puts it in perspective. We treat human talent like it's cheap and disposable or like it's endlessly abundant, whereas we treat oil like it's pure gold.
Precisely. And the terrible irony here is that we actually need that human resource to solve the natural resource problem. Innovation is literally the only way out of our environmental mess. We aren't going to just conserve our way out of climate change. We need radical new ideas. So if we are systematically crushing the exact creativity we need to solve the problem, we are cooked.
Yeah.
We are basically sawing off the branch we are sitting on.
I want to pause on the context of this book for a second because this is the third edition. The first one came out in 2001, then 2011, and now this one. Why keep rewriting the same core message? Is the message itself changing, or is he just trying to stay relevant?
No, the core message isn't changing at all. The Regency is changing. In the preface, he basically says, I hate to say I told you so, but
But I told you so. The very polite British version of I told you so.
exactly right. The world is aggressively proving his initial thesis right. The rate of change in our society isn't linear anymore, it is exponential. He actually quotes Abraham Lincoln, which is surprisingly relevant for a discussion about modern technology and the future. He quotes, "The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present."
The stormy present, that feels incredibly relevant for right now.
It really does. And Robinson is saying that our institutions, our schools, our corporate hierarchies, our government structures, they are all dogmas of the quiet past. They were built for a world that moved slowly, a world where you could get a university degree, get a job at a big firm like IBM, and stay there for 40 solid years until they handed you a gold watch at retirement. That entire world is gone. It's not just changing, it has evaporated completely.
And yet we are still acting like it's there. We are still telling kids and young professionals, this is the path, follow the steps.
We are deeply entrained to it. We are enthralled by it. And that brings us to the core mission of this deep dive. Robinson wants to disenthrall us. He wants to snap us out of this cultural hypnosis that says intelligence only looks like this or success only looks like that.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned the human element of all this because I notice a dedication at the very front of the book. It just says, for Terry, who makes everything possible. It is just a tiny little line, but it honestly stopped me in my tracks.
It adds this beautiful layer of warmth right from page 1. You realize that even this massive global thought leader who has advised governments and whose TED Talk has been viewed by practically everyone on Earth. I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
over 400 million people have engaged with this work. He is deeply grounded in human connection. It reinforces this underlying theme of striking the heart, this concept of Zijineshin, reaching directly into the core of human emotion and passion. This isn't just dry academic theory for him. It is about the people he loves, and by extension, the people you and I love.
And for you, the listener tuning in right now, maybe you're driving your commute or maybe you're at the gym. Why does this matter to you personally? If I am an accountant or I work in global logistics or I am a dentist, why do I need to be disenthralled? What is the actual risk if I just keep doing what I'm doing?
The risk is that if you aren't disenthralled, you are incredibly vulnerable. If you are operating on the old rules, the rules that say keep your head down, do exactly what you're told, follow the employee manual to the letter, you are in the most dangerous position possible economically. The storm that Lincoln talked about is coming for the safe routine jobs first.
So let's really talk about this storm. Section 1 of the text is all about the revolution we are living in. And he isn't talking about political revolutions or people building barricades in the streets.
No, he is talking about an unprecedented collision of global forces.
Yeah.
Technology is the obvious one we all point to: AI, advanced automation, the pervasive internet. But he layers in exploding population growth and massive rapid economic shifts. It is the speed of this collision that matters the most. He spends a lot of time talking about nonlinearity.
Nonlinearity. That sounds like something I would hear in a high-level physics lecture or a complex math class. Translate that for me and for everyone listening. What does he actually mean by a non-linear life?
Okay, think of your life as a straight line drawn on a piece of paper. The old deal that our grandparents had was perfectly linear. You are born, you go to preschool, then elementary school, high school, university. You get an entry-level job. You get promoted every few years. You retire at 65, you die. That is a straight, solid line. Our entire education system is built to serve that line. It's a factory conveyor belt.
Right, it's first grade, second grade, third grade. Do not fall off the belt. If you fall off the belt, you are considered broken.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But reality, especially reality right now, is wildly nonlinear. Reality is incredibly messy. Innovations happen out of absolute nowhere that change entire industries overnight. The internet wasn't just a linear improvement on the fax machine. It wasn't just a faster way to send paper. It was a complete rupture. It destroyed the old model and built a completely new one. Robinson argues that we are currently trying to prepare kids and manage employees for a future that we literally cannot see.
Yeah.
We are prepping them to walk a straight line, but they're going to be living in a crazy, unpredictable scribble.
He has that quote from J.K. Galbraith in this section that made me laugh out loud when I read it, but then I stopped laughing pretty quickly when I thought about the implications.
You mean the one about economic forecasting?
Yeah, that one. He writes, the primary purpose of economic forecasting is to make astrology look respectable.
It is brutal. It is such a sick burn on economists.
But is it actually fair? I mean, economists have massive data models and algorithms. Astrology just has star charts and birth dates?
I think it is totally fair in the specific context Robinson is using it. Think about it. If you were a high school guidance counselor back in, say, 2005, could you have possibly told a student, hey, listen, you should really study hard to be a social media manager? Or you should really focus on becoming a full-time Uber driver or an app
No,
developer?
those jobs didn't even exist. The fundamental technology required for them didn't exist yet.
Exactly.
Ugh.
And yet we are still sitting down with 18-year-olds today and telling them to pick a university major that will ostensibly define their career for the next 40 years when we as a society do not even know what the global economy will look like in 5 years, let alone 40. We are essentially casting economic horoscopes. Oh, you're a Capricorn who is good at math. You should be a data analyst. It is all just guessing. And Galbraith is saying, let's at least be honest and admit we are guessing.
So if you cannot predict the jobs, what do you actually do? This is the ultimate panic moment for parents and leaders. If the map of the future is totally useless, how do you teach someone to navigate the terrain?
You have to stop teaching them the map. The map is outdated the literal second you print it. Instead, you start teaching them how to use a compass. You teach them how to read the terrain dynamically as they walk through it. And that compass, in Robinson's view, is creativity. This naturally brings us to the concept he pulls in called the new untouchables.
This is a concept from Thomas Friedman, right? From his book, The World is Flat.
Right. Both Friedman and Robinson identify a massive shift in the global workforce. In the old days, being average was totally fine. If you were an average accountant, you had a solid job. If you were an average factory worker, you had a job for life. Now average is officially dead. Anything that relies on routine, on following a set manual, on what they call logico-deductive steps.
Logico-deductive, there is that academic term again.
It just means if A, then B. Logic. Fixed rules. Algorithms. Computers are really, really good at that. They're vastly better at it than you or I will ever be. If your job consists primarily of following a set of rules and AI or a cheaper worker halfway across the world can do it, those jobs are touchable. They can be reached, grabbed, and outsourced or automated away.
So who are the untouchables then? Are we just talking about the rare superstars, the geniuses, the Picassos, and the Elon Musks of the world?
No, it is much, much broader than that. It is anyone who has the ability to synthesize complex information, anyone who can deeply empathize. The untouchables are the people who can imagine a completely new service that a machine couldn't dream up. They're the people who can tell a compelling story that actually connects with human emotion. They're the ones who can look at a chaotic problem and see a novel solution that isn't written in any manual.
Can you give me a very concrete example, like a normal, everyday job?
Sure, let's take a nurse. A specialized robot can take your blood pressure perfectly. A robot can probably dispense specific medication more accurately than a tired human. But a robot cannot look you in the eye, realize that you are secretly terrified about your diagnosis, and hold your hand in a specific way that lowers your cortisol levels and actually helps your body heal. That empathy is a deeply creative act of human synthesis. That job is incredibly hard to touch. Or take a customer service rep. The basic script for a return can be handled by a chatbot. But the person who can diffuse a genuinely furious customer by making a well-timed joke and connecting on a shared human level, that is an untouchable skill.
So what you're saying is that creativity isn't about being artsy or painting pictures. It is quite literally about being irreplaceable in the modern economy.
It is about profound adaptability. It is the only true form of job security we have left. If you can consistently create human value in a way that an algorithm cannot, you are safe. If you are just trying to be a reliable, repetitive cog, you are in deep trouble. The machine is completely changing its gears, and it just doesn't need those old cogs anymore.
Okay, I completely buy that. Adapt or die. But here is where I get incredibly frustrated reading this, and I think Robinson shares this frustration. If this is so glaringly obvious, if the world clearly needs creative, adaptable, empathetic people, why are our schools still relentlessly drilling kids for standardized bubble tests? Why are modern companies still filtering resumes based strictly on GPA? Why are we collectively still acting like it's 1950?
Because we are insisting on driving the car by looking exclusively in the rearview mirror.
The rearview mirror. Break that metaphor down for us.
It is one of the most powerful images Robinson uses in the whole book. Imagine you are driving a car down a highway. You are speeding up, going faster and faster. The road ahead of you is twisty. It's chaotic. It's full of thick fog that represents the future. But instead of looking forward through the windshield to see what's coming, you have your eyes locked fixedly into the rearview mirror. You are trying to navigate the complex terrain ahead based entirely on the road you have already passed.
You are 100% going to crash the car.
You are definitely going to crash. And Robinson argues that our entire global education system is doing exactly this. We are fundamentally obsessed with what he calls the academic illusion, which is the idea that human intelligence is just one very narrow, specific thing. We look at the past, we see that university professors and scholars were held up as the absolute pinnacle of smart, and so we try to reverse engineer every single child to be a university professor.
Let's really drill into that. What exactly is the illusion?
The central illusion is the unquestioned belief that academic ability equals overall human intelligence.
Wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Isn't academic ability basically the definition of intelligence? Like if you get an A in advanced physics, you are smart. If you fail physics, you aren't as smart. That seems pretty straightforward to most people.
You are smart at physics. You are smart at a very specific type of academic logico-deductive work. But is that really the sum total of human capacity? Is that the only valid way a human being can be smart? What about the 16-year-old kid who completely fails written physics but can take apart a broken car engine and rebuild it flawlessly in an afternoon using spatial reasoning and kinesthetic intelligence? What about the kid who can walk into a tense, crowded room, instantly read the subtle emotional dynamics, and diffuse a potential fight between two people before it even starts? What about the professional dancer who has absolute perfect kinesthetic control over every muscle in their body?
We usually label those as soft skills, or we call them hobbies or vocational trades. We definitely downgrade them in the hierarchy.
Exactly, we aggressively dismiss them. The academic illusion dictates that the only thing that truly counts on a societal level is that specific type of desk-bound brain work. Writing essays, solving algebraic equations, recalling historical facts on demand. Robinson argues that this entire system wasn't handed down by God. It was designed very specifically in the 19th century to meet the exact labor needs of the Industrial Revolution. It's essentially a cloning program for compliant factory workers and managers.
And what happens to you if you don't happen to naturally fit that specific mold?
If your inherent brilliance is in your hands or in your physical body or in your ear for music or in your emotional heart, the system implicitly and very often explicitly tells you day after day, you are not smart, you are lesser.
And that message sticks, doesn't it? I personally know people in their 40s and 50s who still secretly think they're dumb because they flunked high school French or struggled with calculus, even though they now run highly successful million-dollar businesses. They are still carrying that failing grade around like a weight.
That is exactly what he means by displaced talent. Millions of people are displaced from their own natural inherent abilities. They are alienated from themselves. And systematically, this creates this terrifying macroeconomic issue called academic inflation.
Ah, yes, academic inflation. This part of the book really hit home for me. It's the idea that the university degree itself is rapidly losing its actual value.
It is just basic economic supply and demand. Back in, say, 1950, a university degree was essentially a golden ticket. It was rare. If you managed to get one, you were practically guaranteed a comfortable management job for life. But now we have pushed absolutely everyone through that exact same funnel, so the inherent value of the ticket drops. Now you need a master's degree to even get an interview for a job that used to only require a bachelor's degree 20 years ago. You need a PhD to do a job that used to require a master's. We are forcing young adults to stay in the academic system longer, take on massive amounts of crippling financial debt, suffer incredible psychological stress, all for a piece of paper that buys them less and less security in the real world.
It is a treadmill, a really expensive treadmill. You have to run faster and faster and spend more and more just to stay in the exact same place in the job market.
And it is a treadmill that is making an entire generation fundamentally sick. The skyrocketing suicide rates, the epidemic of clinical anxiety among students. Robinson links this directly back to the crushing pressure of the academic illusion. We are lying to people, telling them there is only one narrow gate to a successful, happy life, and that gate is getting smaller and smaller and astronomically more expensive to enter.
It creates this intense blindness in adult organizations, too, once people leave school. Right. There is this story he tells in the book about the museum security guard that I think just perfectly illustrates this hierarchy of value in the real world. It is a funny story, but it's also deeply, deeply sad.
Oh, the security guard story.
Yeah.
Yes. It is the absolute perfect micro example of the academic illusion infecting the workplace. So Robinson is consulting, and he is talking to a senior head of security at a massive, very famous museum. And the security guy is just grumpy. He is visibly irritated and frustrated. Robinson asks him what's wrong. The guard explains that senior management just hired this incredibly fancy, wildly expensive consulting firm from New York to come in and figure out how to, quote, improve the visitor experience, unquote.
That is the most standard corporate move ever. Ignore your staff, bring in the guys in the expensive suits, pay them a fortune to tell you what you probably already know.
Right. And the security guard looks at Robinson and asks this very simple, profound question. Why didn't they just ask us?
Us being the security guards on the floor.
Yes. Think about the reality of the situation. The security guards are the human beings literally standing in the art galleries for 8 hours a day, every single day. They physically watch the visitors. They see exactly where people get confused by the layout. They see where the physical bottlenecks happen. They see which specific paintings people spend 20 minutes staring at and which ones they completely ignore and walk right past. They're the ultimate frontline experts on the actual visitor experience.
They possess all the raw data. They have better data than any survey could ever generate.
They have infinitely better data than the consultants with their clipboards and theoretical models. But the museum's senior management didn't even consider viewing the guards as creative or insightful. They viewed them essentially as furniture, as uniforms filling space. Because the guards didn't have Ivy League degrees, they didn't use corporate buzzwords. Because of the academic illusion, management assumed that lack of academic pedigree meant lack of valuable insight. So the museum wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the guards felt completely alienated and undervalued.
It is just a massive, tragic waste. It goes right back to that human resources crisis we started with. We are actively ignoring the absolute brilliance standing right in front of us simply because it happens to be wearing the wrong uniform.
Exactly. We spill the talent because we refuse to recognize it as talent.
So if we want to stop doing that, if you listening want to stop wasting talent in your own life or your own business, we have to be really clear about what we're actually talking about. Robinson is incredibly precise about his vocabulary. He says that in common language, we constantly confuse the words imagination, creativity, and innovation. We use them like they are all the exact same thing. I want to stop here and really define these three terms because I know I personally use them interchangeably all the time.
Most people do.
Yeah.
But if you want to fix the systemic problem, you need the correct diagnostic vocabulary. Robinson structures it as a progression. He says essentially that imagination is the internal laboratory and creativity is the tangible product that comes out of that lab.
Okay, let's break that down piece by piece. Start with imagination. What is it, strictly speaking?
Imagination is the bedrock foundation of everything else. Robinson defines it scientifically as the ability to bring to mind things that are not currently present to our physical senses. It is the absolute root of human uniqueness on this planet. You can be physically sitting in a boring office chair, but in your internal mind, you can be walking on the surface of Mars, or you can be standing in the 17th century, or you can be interacting with a fantasy world that has never actually existed. We are not temporally or spatially locked in the here and now.
He actually includes a great little thought experiment for this in the text. He asks the reader to picture a green polar bear wearing a dress.
Yes, let's actually do it right now. You, the person listening to this right now, close your eyes if you aren't driving and explicitly picture a green polar bear wearing a dress.
Okay, I have got it clearly in my head. It is totally ridiculous. It's got this little frilly pink tutu on. The fur is this bright neon lime green color, and it is looking at me very judgingly.
Now, I have to ask, have you ever seen a neon green polar bear wearing a pink tutu in real life?
I can safely say definitely not.
But you can see it perfectly in your mind's eye. That specific capacity is what Robinson calls the imaginal. It is a distinct concept from being, quote, imaginative, unquote, which usually implies some kind of active creative output. But the core biological capacity is the imaginal. It means we are fundamentally untethered from the present moment. My dog, as much as I deeply love him, is permanently locked in the present. He is not lying on the rug worrying about his future pension plan or imagining a giant green cat. He's just existing. Human imagination allows us to step completely outside the flow of time. It allows us to selectively visit the past through memory and actively anticipate the future through projection.
Okay, so that makes sense for imagination. So what makes creativity functionally different? If I am sitting here vividly imagining this green bear, am I being creative?
Robinson would argue very firmly no. You are being highly imaginative. You are seeing something novel in your internal mind that isn't physically there. But that is an entirely private act. You could hypothetically sit on your living room couch for a solid week, vividly imagining the most incredibly complex, beautiful opera ever conceived in human history. But if you never actually write down a single note of sheet music, If you never sing a single lyric out loud, you are not being creative.
Because I haven't actually created anything in the real world.
Exactly. Creativity requires action. He defines creativity as applied imagination. That is the crucial turning point. To be creative, you must actually do something. You have to take the internal thought and manifest a public artifact.
A public artifact. That phrase sounds a bit academic, like something dug up by archaeologists and put behind glass in a museum.
It just means a tangible thing that exists outside of your own head. It could literally be anything. It could be a new mathematical theory, a pop song,
Hmm.
a completely new way of organizing the chaotic office filing system, or even just baking a really unique cake. It has to exist in the shared physical or conceptual world. It requires you to manipulate a medium.
I really love that hard distinction because, for me at least, it takes the immense pressure off just having magical ideas all the time and puts the focus squarely on executing ideas. It makes about doing the actual work.
It is entirely about the work.
Hmm.
And that is incredibly liberating, honestly, because it means you don't have to be born a tortured genius with a head naturally full of magic.
Mm.
You just have to be willing to take your raw ideas and put in the sweat to try and make them real in a medium.
And then the third step in this progression is innovation. Where does that fit in?
Innovation is simply the process of putting those creative ideas into widespread practice. It is when the public artifact is adopted by a larger group or a culture to solve a problem. So to trace the line, imagination provides the raw internal vision which leads to creativity, where you build a prototype which leads to innovation, where the prototype changes the world.
But there is a really tricky catch in his formal definition of creativity that we need to talk about. He says it is the process of having original ideas that have value. That specific word value seems incredibly slippery to me. Who exactly gets to decide what has value and what is just garbage?
It is remarkably slippery, and Robinson acknowledges that. Value is highly context dependent. Robinson asks two critical questions: original for whom and value for whom. For example, if a 5-year-old child is playing with paints and suddenly figures out on their own that mixing yellow paint and blue paint makes green, that is a profoundly creative act for them. It is totally original to their personal experience. It has immense developmental value to them. It doesn't matter one bit that millions of humans have discovered that exact same thing over thousands of years. We shouldn't discourage that child by saying, oh, that's already been done, you aren't creative.
But when you scale that up to the wider adult world, the concept of value shifts radically over time. He brings up the historical example of Galileo.
Galileo is the absolute classic textbook example of changing value. In his own time, Galileo's scientifically accurate ideas about the Earth revolving around the sun were considered by the authorities to have massive negative value. They were legally heretical. He was put under permanent house arrest for being creative. Now, hundreds of years later, he is universally revered as a foundational hero of modern science. Or look at the opposite trajectory. Look at phrenology, the practice of reading a person's personality and intelligence by feeling the physical bumps on their skull.
Right, which sounds completely insane to us now.
Exactly. But in the 19th century, that was considered cutting-edge, high-value medical science. People paid fortunes for it. Now we recognize it as complete pseudoscientific nonsense. So when we as leaders or educators sit down to judge the value of a new creative idea, we have to approach it with profound humility. We have to recognize that what we currently think is a useless, annoying disruption today might actually be the revolutionary standard of tomorrow.
That humility naturally brings us to the actual mechanics of the creative process itself. Because I think a huge majority of people secretly believe that creativity is just pure, inexplicable magic. You know, the whole eureka myth. You sit quietly under an apple tree, you wait for the lightning bolt of inspiration to strike your brain, and boom, you instantly have a finished symphony. But Robinson is very aggressive in saying, no, it is absolutely not magic. It is a grueling, iterative process.
He brings in a quote from George Kelly, a prominent psychologist, who describes creativity as a process of successive approximations.
Ah.
It is inherently messy. You make something up, you try it out in the real world, it completely fails you. Analyze the failure, you tweak it, you try again. It is a constant series of rough drafts. It is quite literally making it up as you go along and then ruthlessly refining it based on feedback.
I really appreciate the biological analogy he uses to explain how the brain operates during this process. It makes the abstract mental struggle feel very physical and understandable.
This specific concept is incredibly helpful for anyone who currently feels blocked in their work. He explains that the human brain essentially operates in two distinct modes during creative work: the generative mode and the evaluative mode. The generative mode is when your brain is rapidly coming up with raw ideas. This is the wild, unconstrained brainstorming phase. What if we tried this crazy thing? What if we combined X and Y? The evaluative mode is the complete opposite. It is when your brain critically judges the ideas. Does this actually work? Is this scientifically accurate? Will this cost way too much money?
And the massive problem for most of us is that we aggressively try to do both of those things at the exact same time.
We constantly shoot down our own ideas before we even finish articulating them. We say, what if we, no, wait, that's stupid. The boss will hate that that won't ever work.
I am so guilty of that. I do that all the time. My internal editor is brutally fast.
Most adults do. And the analogy Robinson uses is that trying to be generative and evaluative simultaneously is exactly like trying to inhale and exhale at the exact same time.
Yeah.
You simply cannot do it. If you try much, you will just choke and gasp for air. You absolutely have to intentionally separate the two modes. You have to allow yourself to just inhale to generate wild ideas without a single ounce of judgment, and then later you switch modes and exhale to evaluate and edit. If you try to grammatically edit the entire book while you're trying to write the very first rough sentence, you will never write the book. You have to breathe in fully and then breathe out fully.
That is just such a deeply practical takeaway for everyday life. Don't inhale and exhale at the same time. Let the ideas flow, then edit them. And another crucial part of this process is finding your specific medium. You mentioned the medium earlier. He quotes Richard Feynman, the famous Nobel Prize-winning physicist here.
I love this specific Feynman quote so much. Feynman said, if you want to accurately describe the complex movement of electrons, you absolutely need algebra. But if you want to deeply express your love for another human being, you should use poetry.
And the punchline that follows is great. He says, don't hand them a pocket calculator and say, here, you work it out.
Right, just here calculate exactly how much I love you to 3 decimal places. It's humorous, but it starkly highlights a profound tragedy in how we operate our education system. We systematically force every single child to only use the calculator. We aggressively privilege one specific medium, usually mathematics or written academic prose, over absolutely everything else. But maybe your personal medium for understanding the world is modern dance. Maybe it is audio and sound design. Maybe it is complex human interaction and community organizing. Maybe it's culinary arts. If you continuously judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, as the old saying goes, it will live its whole entire life believing it is stupid. We desperately need to build systems that help people find the specific medium where they can authentically speak their truth.
I want to pivot here and talk about Daryl, because we have been talking a lot about macroeconomics and educational theory and abstract definitions. But Robinson's book is fundamentally anchored by incredible human stories. And the story of Daryl, I really don't think I will ever forget this one. It perfectly crystallizes that underlying theme of striking the heart of Ziyi Nishin.
It truly is the emotional heartbeat of the entire book. It is the exact moment where all this high-level academic theory suddenly becomes flesh and blood and real human stakes.
Set the scene for the listener. Who exactly is Daryl when we first meet him?
When we meet Daryl, he is well in the cold eyes of the state system. Daryl is a complete write-off. He is officially categorized as a young offender. He is enrolled in an alternative intervention program called the Academy in England. He is an incredibly tough, angry kid. He has a long documented history of physical violence, academic failure, and serious trouble with the police. He has basically dropped out of, or been kicked out of, everything he's ever tried. If you just looked at his paper file, you would definitively say, this kid is entirely done. He is just a grim statistic waiting to happen.
And the brilliant thing is the program doesn't respond by forcing him into remedial math class to try and, quote, fix him, unquote.
No, they do something that seems completely counterintuitive.
Yeah.
They put this tough, angry kid into a modern dance production.
Which on paper sounds like an absolute recipe for a fistfight. You take a highly aggressive street kid and say, okay, put on these tights and express your feelings.
You would absolutely think it would be a disaster. But incredibly, Daryl actually found his medium. He starts participating in the dancing. And he discovers that it is incredibly hard, grueling physical work. It requires intense focus, physical discipline, immense strength, and careful coordination with others. And Daryl gives this quote after a particularly brutal training session. He is sweating and exhausted, and he says, you do one good session here and you ache all over. But it's a good ache.
A good ache. That is such a profoundly visceral description of purposeful effort.
Really stop and think about the psychological weight of that phrase for a kid like him. Most of the pain in Daryl's life up to that exact point was deeply bad pain. The psychological pain of chronic failure, the physical pain of getting into street fights, the emotional pain of constant rejection, the pain of being told every day that he is stupid and worthless. Suddenly, for the first time in his life, he is experiencing the pain of positive growth. the deep, satisfying pain of his intense physical effort, perfectly matching a meaningful purpose.
It is the incredible feeling of finally being utilized for exactly what you are naturally good at.
Exactly. But here is the most fascinating and important ripple effect of this whole story. Finding his medium didn't just make him a highly skilled dancer, it fundamentally changed his core empathy. He explicitly noted that learning how to dance in a troupe, learning how to physically lift other dancers to coordinate complex timing, to implicitly trust someone else not to drop you, made him realize that he actively had to start looking at situations from other people's points of view. The rigorous physical discipline of the dance literally translated into deep moral and emotional growth.
And then the father's reaction at the end of the program. This is the part that just completely gutted me when I read it.
Right, so the father comes to watch the final stage production. He is probably sitting in the audience bracing himself, expecting a total disaster or an embarrassment. Instead, he sees his son, this chronic problem child, who he has probably despaired over for years. He sees him effortlessly lifting other dancers, maintaining intense focus, acting as a reliable leader on stage. And afterward, the dad is just in tears talking to the program organizer. He said, "I honestly cannot believe that is my son out there. It is like you took him, cloned him, and made him good."
Made him good. God, that just hurts to hear a parent say.
It really does, because it deeply implies that the father secretly believed his own son was inherently bad at his core, just broken. But Daryl was never bad. He was just desperately trapped in the wrong element. When he finally found his true medium, which happened to be complex physical movement, the perceived badness just evaporated. He didn't just become a competent dancer, he became a functional citizen. He became a fully realized person.
It provides absolute concrete proof that creativity is not just a nice-to-have luxury for wealthy schools. For Daryl, finding his creativity was a literal rescue mission.
It unequivocally saved his life. And that is exactly why Sir Ken Robinson is so relentlessly passionate throughout this book. He is not just politely arguing for 10 more minutes of finger painting class so we can have some nice colorful pictures to hang up in the school hallway.
Yeah.
He is fiercely arguing that if we do not actively help people discover their own personal good ache, we are fundamentally abandoning them. We are leaving that precious human resource to rot in the ground.
So we have looked deeply at the individual experience. We have looked at the struggling student. But realistically, most of the adults listening to this deep dive right now operate within complex corporate organizations. We have demanding bosses, or we are the demanding bosses. How do we practically take this transformative Daryl energy and apply it to a rigid corporate structure? Because my regional manager is probably not going to let me start an interpretive dance troupe in the accounting department to boost morale.
Well, probably not, no. But Robinson addresses this directly in his section on leading a culture of creativity. And he brilliantly shifts his core metaphor here. He moves away from the industrial factory metaphor and moves toward an agricultural metaphor. He says a leader needs to act like a gardener.
A gardener instead of a mechanic.
Exactly. Think about what a gardener actually does. A gardener cannot physically make a plant grow.
Yeah.
You cannot reach your hands into the dirt, grab a closed flower bud, and forcefully pull it upward to make it bloom faster. If you try to force it, you will instantly kill the plant. As a gardener, your only actual power is to meticulously create the optimal conditions, the right pH in the soil, the exact right amount of sunlight, the correct volume of water under which the plant will naturally flourish completely on its own timeline.
That significantly takes the personal ego out of corporate leadership, doesn't it? You no longer have to be the singular genius with all the brilliant ideas.
In fact, Robinson argues that if you insist on being the genius with all the ideas, you will actively stifle everyone else around you. If you, as the boss, are always the smartest person in the room, you are either in the wrong room entirely, or you are failing profoundly as a leader. He breaks down the complex role of a creative leader into three distinct interconnected spheres: the personal, the group, and the cultural.
Let's systematically look at the personal role first, because this ties directly back to our story about the museum's security guard, doesn't it?
It does perfectly. The personal role of a leader is establishing the foundational belief that absolutely everyone in the organization has untapped creative potential. To prove why this matters, Robinson cites a massive Gallup poll that is, frankly, staggering to read. The poll estimated that actively disengaged employees cost the U.S. economy alone somewhere between $292 billion and $355 billion every single year.
Wait, let me clarify that phrase. Actively disengaged. That doesn't just mean they're a bit lazy or browsing the internet at their desk, right?
No, it is much worse than that. Actively disengaged means they are deeply resentful of being there. They are practically engaging in quiet sabotage of the daily work. They are constantly complaining. They are intentionally slowing down processes. They are aggressively spreading negativity to new hires. They are actively contaminating the corporate culture that the gardener is trying to build.
And then on the flip side, you have the engaged employees.
Yes, the fully engaged ones. These are the people who genuinely feel their unique creativity is being utilized and respected. They are the ones actually driving the profit margin and creating the vital innovations. So the creative leader's very first job in the personal sphere is to stop staring at rigid job descriptions and start intensely looking at the actual human beings in front of them. Who exactly are these people? What secret talents do they have that we are not currently asking them to use? How can I, as the leader, help them find their own version of that good ache within the context of our daily work?
Then moving to the second sphere there is the group role, because real innovation is almost always a team sport.
It really is. The romanticized myth of the lone, tortured genius sitting alone in a dark garret and inventing the future is almost entirely historically false. Even the greatest solo artists in history had robust social scenes, unseen collaborators, fierce rivals who pushed them. In a modern business context, you absolutely must curate diversity in your groups. If you build a project team entirely composed of brilliant conservative accountants, you will undoubtedly have impeccably balanced financial books, but you will not generate a single compelling marketing idea. You desperately need the creative friction that only comes from mashing different types of minds together. And finally, we arrive at the cultural role. This is where he talks about creating the right habits and habitats. I really love that specific phrasing, habits and habitats. Habits are the deeply ingrained systemic things we do repeatedly without thinking: our weekly meeting structures, our rigid reporting hierarchies, our unwritten social rules. Habitats are the actual physical spaces we force people to inhabit while they work. Robinson introduces this fascinating concept called cognitive ergonomics.
Cognitive ergonomics, which sounds incredibly fancy and expensive, but what does it actually mean in practice for an office?
It essentially means intentionally designing a physical space that actually aligns with how the human brain naturally functions. If you look around, most modern corporate offices are still designed exactly like 19th century factories. Endless uniform rows of cubicles, terrible, harsh fluorescent lighting, blank gray walls. That specific physical environment silently broadcasts a very clear command to the brain. It says, shut down your imagination and just process the paperwork. It tells the employee, you are just an interchangeable cog in a machine. If you actually want breakthrough creativity, you have to build habitats that explicitly allow for messy play, for unexpected social collision, and for deep, quiet reflection. The physical environment is always speaking to your staff. If your office visually resembles a medium security prison, you really cannot be surprised when your employees refuse to dance.
Robinson also gets surprisingly personal here and talks about his own difficult journey with vulnerability as a leader managing his own teams. He openly admits he had to learn the hard way to stop constantly competing with his own staff.
That is such a powerful and rare admission for someone of his massive global stature. He candidly shares that early in his career, he constantly felt the pressure to prove he was the absolute smartest person in any room. He felt an intense internal obligation to win every single argument, to definitively prove to everyone that he deserved to be the leader. But over time, he realized that by constantly demonstrating his own brilliance, he was shutting everyone else down. He realized that publicly admitting what he was not good at actually created a vacuum that allowed others to confidently step up. Authentic vulnerability creates the necessary space for other people to practice leadership. Think about it. If the boss already knows the perfect answer to every single problem, why should anyone else bother exerting the mental energy to think? But if the boss sits down and honestly says, look, I really don't know how to solve this. What do you guys think? Suddenly the lights go on in everyone else's eyes.
This naturally leads us into what I think is the deepest, almost philosophical part of the entire book. It is section 7, which is titled Feeling versus Knowing. Robinson argues passionately that in our modern society, we have completely exiled the concept of feeling from our professional and educational lives.
We have collectively created this incredibly damaging false dichotomy. We culturally dictate that intellect is cool, it is academic, it is rigorous, and it is the only valid metric of truth. Conversely, we label emotion as messy, deeply personal, highly subjective, and fundamentally invalid in a professional setting. We constantly hear phrases like, don't get emotional at work, or make sure you leave your personal feelings at the door when you clock in.
But Robinson points out that biologically speaking, that separation is completely impossible.
It is entirely biologically false. He draws heavily on modern neuroscience to prove this point. The brain simply doesn't work that way. We literally feel our ideas. You cannot cleanly separate the raw data from the emotional valence attached to it. When you suddenly have a truly great creative idea, you physically feel a rush of excitement. Your heart rate might even go up. When you are stuck in a pointless, repetitive task, you physically feel lethargic and drained. When you are deeply engaged in your true medium, you physically feel that profound good ache. Emotion and intellect are inextricably linked in the human nervous system.
This whole discussion heavily reminded me of the work of Viktor Frankl.
Yes, absolutely. Robinson explicitly brings in Frankl, who was a renowned psychiatrist and a survivor of the Holocaust. Frankl famously argued in his own work that modern people are falling chronically ill, both psychologically and physically, not because of viruses, but because they fundamentally lack a sense of meaning. They've successfully acquired the how of life, they have the secure job, they have the nice car, they have the comfortable house in the suburbs, but they have completely lost the internal why. They exist in what Frankl called an existential vacuum. Robinson connects the act of creativity directly to solving this exact crisis. Creativity is the literal pathway back to human meaning. It is the crucial bridge that connects our messy internal world of private feelings with the external shared world of public expression. When that bridge is structurally broken or blocked by rigid systems, we get physically and spiritually sick. When that bridge is open and flowing, we flourish.
So, within this framework, authenticity isn't just a trendy corporate buzzword to put on a poster. It is an absolute baseline health requirement for a functioning human being.
It is a non-negotiable requirement. Traditional education and traditional corporate management often aggressively try to standardize us. They desperately want to mold us into the exact same predictable shape so we fit neatly into the giant economic machine without causing friction. Creativity, by its very definition, fiercely insists on our unique individuality. It forcefully demands that we be authentically ourselves. And that inherent friction between the standardizing system and the creative individual is where this core theme of striking the heart really lands with maximum impact. We are constantly fighting a massive systemic inertia that desperately wants us to be identical, simply to reclaim our fundamental biological right to be totally unique. Man, this has been quite a massive journey today. We have traversed all the way from the macroeconomic global resource crisis down into the deeply internal personal crisis of existential meaning. As we start to wrap up this incredible deep dive, I really want to circle all the way back to that Abraham Lincoln quote you mentioned at the very beginning. We must disenthrall ourselves. It is such a beautiful, precise word to use. Disenthrall. To be enthralled literally means to be held in captivity by a spell, to be deeply hypnotized. We as a global culture are completely hypnotized by outdated ideas. We are deeply hypnotized by the comforting lie that human life is supposed to be a straight, predictable line. We are hypnotized by the illusion that academic success is the singular valid path to a worthy life. We're hypnotized into believing that we simply aren't creative people. To disenthrall ourselves means we have to violently snap out of that comfortable trance. We have to wake up, shake off the old dogmas, and force ourselves to look at the chaotic, stormy present with completely clear, unblinking eyes.
And it pairs so perfectly with that George Carlin quote he throws in right near the end of the text. Just when I found out the meaning of life, they changed it.
It is the absolute perfect note to end on. It humorously but accurately acknowledges the fundamental absurdity of the human condition. We are never going to permanently solve life because the conditions of life are guaranteed to keep violently changing. The map will always become useless. The only reliable, constant tool we possess as a species is our inherent imaginal ability to continuously reimagine, rethink, and recreate our reality.
So here is the final provocative thought for you, the listener. You might be driving home right now, or walking the dog, or sitting quietly at your desk staring at a spreadsheet. And you might be internally thinking, well, this is all very inspiring, but I'm really just a mid-level accountant. Or I'm just an average student struggling to pass. Or I'm way too old to suddenly become a creative person. Sir Ken Robinson's enduring message and the ultimate mission of this entire conversation today is that you possess vast reserves of talent buried deep inside you that you have not even properly met yet. You have a medium out there waiting for you.
And I will leave you with one final thought from Carl Jung, which Robinson brilliantly uses to close the entire philosophical loop of the book. Jung wrote, "I am not what has happened to me. I am what I choose to become." That statement is the absolute essence of living a creative life. You are not simply a passive product of your past educational failures or your current corporate job description. You are the active architect of your own nonlinear future. The key to that lock is currently sitting in your hand. You can consciously choose to turn it backward to lock your true potential away forever safely out of sight, or you can bravely turn it forward and finally release it.
Sir Ken Robinson left us a truly incredible map with this book, but it is entirely up to us to actually take the journey. Thank you so much for spending this time listening to our deep dive into Out of Our Minds. We hope you take these ideas, go out into the stormy present, strike the heart, and systematically make something that genuinely matters.
See you next time, everyone.